Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlores. I'm here along with Meatball. Psst. Hey. Hello. Wow, some up-close Meatball. Yeah, all right. Anyway, I was kind of debating which topic to bring up for today. And, because I could have talked about the sexual assault scandals that are going on in Gen Con, but I decided against that. I'm just, screw Gen Con, basically. Why would anyone go there anymore? It's just so ridiculously stupid, so woke. The Ennies are so woke. They have no relationship. It's like they're in an alternate universe. They have no connection to the actual gaming hobby anymore. None, right? It's just incredible. So, no. So instead, I've decided that I'm going to talk about a funny little anecdote that has come up this week in the gaming community, coming from the creator or supposed creator of a game that I had brought up in an earlier video. And this is a game called Coyote and Crow. I highlighted it as an example of racialized, ideological, propagandistic RPGs, alongside other racist RPGs like the what was it called? Swords Fall and Mythrog. And I'd commented on it anyways. I'd been critical of it. And they had done a Kickstarter, and I guess this was like about 6 months ago, something like that, near the start, around the start of the year or the end of last year, for this RPG that is called Coyote and Crow, which is set in an alternate history where sometime around 1300, a meteor struck the Earth and presumably killed all the white people. And so the American Indians were never conquered, and instead they developed a super civilization, right? A super advanced civilization that was like incredibly sophisticated and wonderful, right? That's basically the story. So it's like, Native American Wakanda. Because also the reason why they could develop this super civilization was magic rocks that came with the comet that hit the Earth. Yeah. And that's about the gist of it. So it was one of these classic virtue signaling products, a product that a lot of people were going to put money into, not because they're ever interested in actually playing it, but because they want to be able to then brag about having supported this on Twitter and Tumblr and places like that, right? And so it didn't really even matter when, I've said this in previous videos, the secret to woke Kickstarter said it doesn't matter if you actually produce anything in the end, because nobody's buying this to play it, right? They're buying it to virtue signal. So the thing they're buying is the Kickstarter project. It's not the product, right? If the product never delivers, chances are it doesn't matter, right? We know this because there are some people that failed to deliver on multiple projects and people kept funding them, right? So, that's in some ways dastardly genius, right? Except that this guy apparently has been trying to make it happen or something. And, this woke virtue signaling, and he, hired a bunch of consultants of, non-white extraction, basically. Of course, obviously a lot of Native American consultants, but maybe some others too. But the big deal was about saying that this is not an RPG made by white people and not for white people, and they raised like $1 million, mostly from white people, right, who wanted to be able to brag to their friends about how much they also hate white people, and they did all this. And then now it turns out, just this past week, that or a little more than a week, maybe, I don't know, that the creator of Coyote and Crow is very angry at white people for not wanting to buy his game. He's trying to sell more of the game because apparently they're having money problems, even though they raised like about $1 million in the Kickstarter. How could this happen? Well, first off, I did a video about this phenomenon, right, where I forget the exact title, but it was, I think I did it right around the end of last year too, like when the LATAM breakthrough was happening. So it's a video about how, the risks or dangers of Kickstarter, how they even if you raise a lot of money, you can fail, because the problem is that you think, if you see a number like, well, if you see like 50,000, never mind 1 million, you think, wow, that's a huge success. This person made so much money, right? Some people might say, that's more than I earned in a year, right? Except that person isn't going to get that money, right? They're not going to get 50,000 out of that, right? And the example I gave in the video that I already spoke about this was this LATAM breakthrough project that had, it raised, I think, 24,000, and it had like a dozen or more people involved in it, right? So once you subtract the production costs, Kickstarter's cut, ttrpg's cut, or wherever it is they're hosting it, right? And if they're printing it, the printing costs, and then having to pay all of these like diversity consultants and whatever else they're hiring. Like, the thing about SJW projects also, even the ones that raise a lot of money, usually especially those, because they like, the whole point is they get a ton of people in, right? Those projects, they always have like 50 people involved, right? Like, that's how, you can raise $1 million if you get like, if you say, okay, we're going to have like 50 people doing this project. And so everybody's like getting their dad and their friends and whatever to buy a copy, right? And so suddenly it looks like it's raised a ton of money, right? Except that then when you like have to divide it with subtract all the costs and then divide it by like 50 people, suddenly everybody's making a tiny, tiny sum at best, right? And then if you get something wrong in that process, if there's like additional costs, which often happens, like I think I said this before in the video previously, if you're like doing a stretch goal that generates another book, right? Like, you have to now make more books because you've beaten all of your stretch goals, and so now you're like not producing one book, you're producing 5, right? And you if you didn't think it very carefully through and estimate like what the real costs were going to be, those costs can get totally away from you, right? So it's entirely possible that this guy who wrote Coyote and Crow is broke now, that he raised $1 million less than a year ago, but now he hasn't got any money. Right, and he's flaming mad at white people for not buying Coyote and Crow. After like, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they want to do that? I mean, just considering step one, right? Like, let's look at the mystery of why white people wouldn't buy Coyote and Crow, right? Step one, this guy has spent the entire campaign of making this project, pointing out how this is not a game written by white people or for white people, right? It's done by indigenous authors, and it's its own thing and whatever, right? And so, it seemed pretty clear that it wasn't, that the point wasn't that it was going to be for white people. It was meant to be for these creators, right? Which brings us to point 2. Right, SJWs who are arguing for diversity quotas, for diversity projects like Radiant Citadel and stuff like this, their entire argument, the whole point of what they say, is that they need to have products that are set in non-European settings, that have non-European characters, and that are written by non-European authors. Because if not, you can't, because you need to have people that look like you in the game, in the setting, in the story, in the art, and the writers have to look like you, because otherwise you can't possibly relate to the setting or the game, right? To the experience of it, right? You don't feel represented in that game, so you can't participate in it. You can't enjoy it. And they're the whole argument of the SJW crowd when it comes to role-playing games is that the reason that there are relatively few minority groups playing RPGs, it's not some kind of a cultural thing. It's not because of a social class thing. It's not because of the, different elements of the localized cultures of these groups and the way that they value things like play and what type of pastimes they engage in or things like that. Now, it's none of that. No, it's just, it's just because people don't make games that have characters that look like them, right? If you have to have characters that look like you, otherwise how can you connect to it, right? It's impossible. So they've been saying this for all this time, right? And so here's this game, Coyote and Crow, right? They blew up all the white people before the game starts, like in the setting. They literally dropped a comment on them, and then they're very much saying there's not a single white person in this setting. It's all indigenous people, right? So how can you possibly relate to that, right? Like, how can you possibly have any kind of understanding of the you're not represented if you're a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? So, what do you expect? That's the rule, right? That's what you've been saying all this time, isn't it? And then let's get to number 3, which is point 3, right? Which is that, in fact, a ton of white people have bought this product. All the people that are going to have bought this product pretty much because these people didn't buy it for the book itself. They bought it to show off in the Kickstarter, right? Like I'm guessing, unfortunately, we don't have a demographic breakdown of Kickstarter donations, but I would bet anything that 90% of the people that donated to Coyote and Crow were white people, right? This is the real audience. The real audience is not indigenous people. It's not the kids on the res. It's not other people of color. It's specifically white gamers as a way to appeal to their sense of guilt and to give them the opportunity to virtue brag about how they've given money for this. And this guy knows it, right? He even set up this thing where you pay, I don't know how much more it was. Like, it was one of the payment tiers where you get a book for yourself, but you're also paying for a book that will be delivered to the reservation. So an Indian child, a Native American child can get that book and will feel represented. So this is what they're doing, and the only problem is that there's very few gamers of any kind who want to play games that are based on political messages, and it's not because it's not European based or something. There are tons of non-European games, non-European based games that have been very, very popular. I mean, granted, some of them are very kind of superficial, and based more on movies and stuff like that than on any real history or something. Like Oriental Adventures is mostly based on stuff from movies and TV that Gary Gygax saw. But not all of them. I mean, Arrows of Indra has done very well, and it doesn't have a single white person either. Now, I didn't have a comment drop on where the white people were, because it didn't really matter back then anyways, and we're talking about India around 2000 BC. So it's not like the white people were doing anything interesting at the time. But, there aren't white people in Arrows of Indra, and it does just fine, right? And the thing is, people like that game because there isn't any politics involved in it. It's just culture, right? It's showing, it's a really careful love letter to a mythology and the culture that derived that mythology and the history of that culture, that is done with incredible attention to trying to be accurate and respectful of it, right? And that does not have any other message. It's not done to say, well, this is because whatever diversity is our strength, or because we're opposed to Christianity, or because whatever. It's not anti-colonial. It's not left-wing. It's not right-wing. It's not any of that. It's a game setting that's an interesting look at a setting that is not your standard medieval European setting, right? I should have probably brought Arrows of Indra out here. I don't know. Well, but Sword and Caravan is doing the same thing. Sword and Caravan is selling like crazy. I'm so happy with it. The second month, it has sold better than the first. I've just come out with the first supplement for it. It's a PDF-only supplement called Social Encounters on the Silk Road, which is actually it's only about 20-something pages, $3.99. And what it has is a bunch of rules for social interactions that are based on the reaction roll mechanic, that simple 2d6 mechanic from the basic expert D&D, but with like it's expanded into a way to use it for much more sophisticated interactions and encounters that are still not. They're definitely an OSR social mechanic. They're not based on the kind of social combat sort of mechanic or skill check sort of mechanic that you get in like post OSR. So it was my way of trying to create a framework for role playing social interactions in an old school format that is still old school. And I think I did a very good job at it. And you can use it for not just Sword and Caravan, but other stuff. But anyways, so Sword and Caravan is another example. It's, most of the areas of that setting are non-European and non-Christian and, not white. People love it. It's really great. Why? Because there's no politics in there. It's entirely about actually playing in this exciting world. And so you wanted to make it political, though, Coyote and Crow Guy, whose name I forget. And you're paying the price for that. Sorry, buddy. That's the cost of what you've done, right? I can totally understand why you wouldn't be getting any sales now. But anyways, this guy says, he writes this diatribe where he says, look, if some of you aren't buying this book because you don't think that you would be able to play a character in this game, you're wrong. You're actually being a little racist by thinking that, right? So you accuse you of being a racist for thinking that you couldn't play this game. And then he says, but if you really are determined not to, then what you still have to do is buy the book and then just never play it. But you have to buy the book or else you're a racist, right? This is what the guy says in this diatribe that he writes, complaining about why he's not getting more sales after raising $1 million from a bunch of leftists that weren't going to play the game ever, right? Okay, so that ship has sailed, and also that is not the pitch you want to be doing, dude. Like what is wrong with these people? Could you guys imagine, if I was, I couldn't conceive of a scenario where I would be saying to people who I want to buy my book, right? Oh yeah, you guys are all pieces of crap, right? You're monsters. We hate you, but you have to buy my book, right? Like, who would do that? Like, I'm a content creator. I'm super happy for anyone who wants to buy my book. I'm super happy for how they plan to use it. I love to hear that they're playing it. If they want to buy it just to read it, that's okay too, I guess. I would be happier if you played it, but I'm not going to tell you what to do with the book, right? And I definitely am not going to, show anything but enormous gratitude for all the people who have bought my products, for everybody who's liked The Invisible College, for everybody who's liked Sword and Caravan, for everybody who's liked the Old School Companion 1, or any of my other gaming products. I am super grateful that you've done that, right? And for any of you that are considering doing it, get it because you want to get something really cool. I think you're going to enjoy it. Like I say this at the end of every video where I say, you could just send me money on Patreon if you really want to, but you're going to get something more out of this if you buy one of my books, because then you're going to get something, at the very least, let's say, even if you don't end up using it, you'll get something that's interesting to read. But hopefully you'll use it and you'll find that it is useful. Because it is, because all of my stuff is made to be played, right? To be gamed with. And if I was like, no, you guys are just, you're all mentally ill or you're wicked, right? Or whatever. Who the hell thinks if you're needing money, that the answer is to say, look, you're a goddamn racist if you don't play my book, if you don't buy my book. If you buy it, you could just not read it or anything. You could just have it. But if you don't buy it, you're a racist. Like, what is wrong with this guy, right? It's just hilarious. Anyways, that I just wanted to report on that and point out that once again, get woke, go broke. People are saying, oh yeah, you keep saying get woke, go broke, but look at this game. It raised $1 million. That's a lot more than you earn, right? Well, no, apparently not, because there's the money I get, I'm looking at net, not gross, and the net is really good for me. So thank you very much. But one more little detail is that in some gaming forums, I have seen some people have posted this guy's picture, right? And according to his biography, he is a member of the Cherokee Nation. He is an official status. In Canada, they say status Indian, right? So or maybe now they call it status First Nations in Canada, but I'm not sure if in the U.S. they call it that or not. But like he's officially registered as Indigenous, right? But you look at the picture, and he looks extremely Caucasian, right? And so there's some people that are saying that he's basically a fake or something like that. Well, look, this is the thing. If I looked this up, right, to be a member of the Cherokee tribe, an official government recognized Native American, in the case of the Cherokees, anyways, you can be as little as 1/64th Cherokee, right? So you could be 63/64ths Irish, let's say, and 1/64th Cherokee, and you could still count as a Cherokee. And so some people would say that, well, that's fake, right? But I wouldn't necessarily say that is. It would depend, right? Because the problem is that ethnicity is not strictly a question of blood or genes or whatever, right? Or skin. That's certainly not skin color. It's a question of multiple factors, right? Your family, your upbringing, your raising, your culture, the context of the people that you've been around, and your actual immersion into the cultural elements of that ethnicity, right? So if maybe this guy is only a 1/64th or 1/32nd or whatever Cherokee, but if he's like spent his whole life around that community, and his parents lived as Cherokees, and he's living as a Cherokee, and he knows the language, and he knows the culture and the traditions and all of that, then I think that there is that it is completely inappropriate, actually, in that case, if that is the case, to simply focus on the color of his skin as something to condemn, right? But it is ironic. It's ironic for a couple of reasons. It's ironic because there seems to be a lot of anti-Caucasianness in someone who is at least partly Caucasian by the looks of it, and probably majority by the looks of it, right? But it's also this irony of this notion that says, well, we want only BIPOC people making games now. We don't want to hire people who aren't BIPOC, which is to say they don't want to hire white people. We want diversity. Diversity means no white people. But you've got guys like this that I mean, what is it all falls back to the stupidity of this entire racialist based concept, right? The idea that the color of a person's skin is important in some damn way, which it isn't. Right? It doesn't matter at all. But there are people, opportunists, and there always have been, that have needed to try to make a use of that, right? Whether you're talking about a Klans member or, Alejandro Ocasio-Cortez, right? Who is, by the way, much less of a Latina than a lot of people with lighter skin than her, right? She barely speaks Spanish. She grew up in a wealthy part of New York and has no real connection to her culture. She's faking it for political gain, right? So, the point is that you've got some of these people, for example, in the SJW area. They claim that this is about racial justice and stuff like that, but really they don't give a damn about it. They don't care that this guy looks white. Let's say he's white passing, if you want to put it that way. He seems more Caucasian at first glance than anything else, right? They don't care about that because he's on their side, right? If he'd been doing something else, let's say he was a Trump voter who made an RPG about Cherokees. But he was a known Trump voter, right? anti-CRT, anti-trans, whatever, stuff like that, then they would instantly attack him. They would claim that he's not really, that he's lied about being a Cherokee. They would attack and vilify him and try to have him canceled and claim that what he's doing is cultural appropriation, claiming he's a fraud, et cetera, right? But not because of how he looks. It still isn't because of how he looks. It's just because he's on the wrong political side in that case, right? This is all about opportunism. And I know this because people say this about me, right? I'm Latino. Look at the color of my skin, right? So I have light skin, right? Now, how Latino am I? Well, I can tell you exactly how Latino I am, right? I am about 32/64 Latino, right? 31/64, let's say. Because, on my mother's side, I'm almost entirely Latino. I'm also a tiny bit Irish, right? But I don't say I'm Irish, right? I guess let's say I'm 1/64 Irish. I don't know if it's exactly that. It actually probably is. There's this Irish captain, Anglo-Irish captain, Captain King, that at some point got into my family line when he came to the South America in the 19th century, right? So the point is, I don't say I'm Irish, right? But that's because I didn't grow up Irish. I don't have any Irish culture. I don't have any particular connection to the Irish. I don't speak the language. I'm not connected to them in any special way, right? But I am Latino, right? And I'm about half Latino, right? And more than just that, that's just the genetic part of it, right? I'm Latino culturally, right? It was the culture of my mother. She raised me, right? It's the culture of a language that I was able to speak very badly from childhood and very well more recently, to the point that now I speak it so fluently that often native speakers don't realize that it isn't my first language until they've spoken to me for quite a while. And it's the culture of the place where I've been living for the last 20 years, and that I've been involved in that culture. I participate in all the aspects of it. I have the same feelings of it, right? And so in every sense, I'm definitely more Latino than AOC, but they want to claim that somehow none of that counts and that I'm a faker or some kind of, that I'm somehow engaging in some kind of a fraud, that I'm just lying about being Latino. Why? Because I'm on the wrong political side, and this guy's on the right political side. So it doesn't matter how Caucasian he looks. He is absolutely a legitimate Cherokee, right? And it's stupid on both sides of that argument. It's a stupid thing to be pointing out. But anyways, the thing is, somebody forgot to tell this guy that his audience is limited to SJWs, especially when he went out of his way to politicize his game and to make anybody who is not a self-civilization hating, absolute ultra-Marxist SJW to think I'm not going to buy this game, right? Because the only people who are going to buy Coyote and Crow are, for the most part, white people who hate themselves, who hate their culture, who hate Western civilization, and who really want to show off how much they have all those hates, That's basically it. So nobody else is going to buy this product, and he's not doing well. And this is proof again of the get woke, go broke paradigm, so to say, right? Meanwhile, I'm doing fucking fantastic. Like my books are selling really well. I'm not getting $100 million Kickstarter, but I'm not doing Kickstarter because I don't need to do Kickstarters. I sell my products direct to players. It's not a big It's not a big production of saying, this is a thing, so I'm going to appeal to your virtue or something like that. Instead, I put the products out on the market, get a publisher, I put them out there, I promote them, and they keep selling better and better. Once again, last month was the best selling month of my career, which is, it's just remarkable. Right? And this is happening pretty much not every single month. Sometimes it fluctuates, sometimes it dips a little, but it's like every month on the trend, right? Year by year, I'm earning more and more money. Stupid levels of money. So I've been consistently successful. And that's just by producing good games. That's the secret. Don't try to be a virtue signaler, and be wary, even whether or not you're a virtue signaler, but especially if you're trying to make a real game, be wary of how you use Kickstarter, because I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that this guy has not committed some kind of fraud or something like that. He didn't just spend all the money. Maybe he did blow some of the money that for himself or whatever that he assumed would be profit. But I think the most likely thing is that having 50 different cultural consultants or whatever that he's hired, having this huge crew of virtue signaling teams that are all have to get credit and all have to get paid, plus the production costs, plus the shipping costs, all the unexpected things, and the cut that are taken by the publisher, that are taken by Kickstarter itself. It turned out he actually ended up having costs that outdid his profits, even though he made $1 million. If you make $1 million in profits, but you have 1,010,000 in costs, the end result of that is that you're $10,000 in debt, right? And that's what happens. So be very careful when you're running a Kickstarter, how you plan it. And I guess I'll leave it on that note. If you like this video, please share it anywhere that you think that you're going to have somebody that'll be interested in it, or somebody that this will piss off, and subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and check out all of my products. RPG Pundit Presents, Lion and Dragon, Arrows of Indra, which we mentioned before, Star Adventure, Sword and Caravan. If you want some good non-European adventuring, check out Arrows of Indra and check out Sword and Caravan. They're both really fascinating, and they're not there to preach at you or tell you that you're awful. They're just there to show you a really cool setting. Okay. I want to check out all my books. If you really don't want to buy one of my books, or you've bought all of my books, then I guess you can support me on Patreon too. There's a link in the description below. But I certainly think you're going to benefit from checking out my books. And okay, I guess that's everything for today. Currently smoking Lorenzetti Horn plus Argento Races.